Too peaky or not too peaky? That is the question. With a show that had 36 episodes, 6 seasons in total from 2012 to 2022, we're now getting a movie, The Immortal Man. So many of us have been wrapped up in the world of Peaky Blinders, and I kind of came in last minute to that. And Netflix has just released the film, which came out a little bit earlier this month in select theaters. I went out with a group of friends. We actually had planned for this day to get dressed up, to go see the film. We were really, really excited. And everybody turned to look at me as the credits were rolling and went, "What did you think?" And honestly, all I could say was, "I'm very disappointed." So I felt bad because everybody else is like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Well, okay, if I'm the only one thinking this, maybe I gotta go back and watch this or just kind of reiterate what I just saw before the film comes out. Maybe I'm wrong." But I think what really irked me is I just saw clips of Tim Roth and Rebecca Ferguson saying that they really had never even seen the series or didn't watch a single episode. And then Steven Knight being asked why Tom Hardy as Alfie Solomons didn't return, saying it didn't make sense. Which, how does that make sense when you're talking about World War II, which was a persecution for the Jewish people themselves and also the Romani? So why wouldn't the character of Alfie Solomons, who is of proud Jewish heritage, be involved at all? There were just so many things that did not work about this film. But then again, you have the problem of 6 seasons and promoting a film to people who maybe have never seen the series, and you have to have a standalone film. And Stephen Knight was saying, well, people can go into this not knowing anything about the series. But here's the thing, what about the people that invested those 6 years into those characters, most of them who didn't even reappear in the film? I enjoyed the series so much because of the character development and the characters we got to know. And it's kind of a surprise for me because I don't do videos like this on my YouTube channel. I usually just post performances and interviews, but I love the show so much. I had to just address some things that I had questions about and how I think that the script could have been with some of the material that Stephen Knight was working with, because some of it does work. So to understand the world of Peaky Blinders is to understand the world of Thomas Shelby. Thomas Shelby returns home from World War One. He's a changed man because he was a soldier, and all soldiers didn't return the same, as Polly did say, Polly being his aunt. He has 3 brothers, Arthur, John, Finn. He has a sister, Ada, and the family is trying to survive in this new world after World War One and trying to create a legitimate business. And when you're talking about the anti-hero and the hero part about Tommy, he has ethics. He wants to set his family up for success. He wants to protect them. He wants to actually have a legitimate business and to make something new and better, especially after he meets Grace, which is this character that comes in on season 1 and kind of changes Tommy and gives him a little bit more purpose and wanting to do good. But of course, that all backfires when, spoiler alert, which there will be a lot of spoilers, Grace turns out to be a spy. Tommy's heart is broken. Not that his ethics ever change, but his passion for actually doing good seems to dwindle. And in the next couple of seasons, we see how that affects him. And it always comes back to Grace, which surprisingly is really not even featured in this film. I thought they were going to bring her back as a ghost, as they had in previous seasons, but they didn't even do that, which was a surprise. And this is coming from somebody who is not a Grace fan. So let's get into why this film doesn't work. I think the number one reason is Aunt Polly is not a part of it. We know the actress herself, Helen, passed away in the middle of shooting the final seasons of Peaky. And actually, I went on a tour last summer to visit some of the locations that Peaky was shot at. It was wonderful. I will create another video of that experience. It was just wonderful. But I met a lot of people who worked on the set, who worked at the locations and were there when the shooting was happening. Apparently, before COVID hit, they were going to have the last 2 seasons in the can. It was prior to Helen passing away. And when COVID hit, that all hit the fan. So I can't even imagine for Stephen Knight and the rest of that cast and crew who have worked with Helen. The personal loss is tremendous. And then you have this loss of the heart of the show itself. So how do you wrap up those loose ends? And yes, they did the best they could to finish the last 2 seasons along the way after Grace's death in season 3, with his family, the loss of his brother John, with his second wife Lizzie leaving and taking his son that he had with Grace Charles with him. The loss of Polly. We're now approaching the beginning of World War I. Hitler is on the rise, including the Nazis. And Tommy is now in a house, an abandoned house by himself, only with Johnny Dogs, one of his good friends, and he's writing a book. Which I think is very odd because for me, I think Tommy, when he rides off into the sunset, he loves horses. That's always been the thing. He always adored horses and working with horses and loved his people, the Romani. I would have just assumed he would have gone off with them. But no, he's writing a book. And season 6, we had the introduction of Duke, who is an illegitimate son of Tommy, or that was what was claimed, played by a different actor who had a different ethnicity compared to Barry, who fulfills this character and kind of reclaims the Peaky Blinders status as being the Peaky Blinder in that area and ruling all the Peaky Blinders, but not doing it in a way that had ethics, at least the ethics that Tommy had. And Ida comes back, Tommy's sister, and she is working within the government of the area. The odd thing was there is no mention of Finn. They didn't even bring back his actor who had been a part of that series for 5 seasons. So why doesn't Finn come back when there was this dilemma of Finn versus Duke in the last season? Why couldn't he come back? And in the meantime, Ida is killed off. Again, why? See, the thing about losing Polly is that Polly would keep Tommy in check, and killing off Ida, who would have kept Tommy in check because it's his sister, of course, just seems like now you don't have a foil for Tommy to work off of, whether it be Polly, whether it be Ida, whether it be Jesse Eden, whether it be May Carlton. There's always a female foil for Tommy, and he doesn't have this. And I'm not even counting Rebecca Ferguson because that whole character just seems, again, thrown together and thrown on Tommy. So Tommy does give Duke a what for. Unfortunately, Tommy is shot during the final shootout and dies in Barry, Duke's arms. And that kind of leads to Duke being the one to take over the Peaky Blinders because now apparently there's supposed to be new episodes, a new season of Peaky Blinders continuing with Duke's story, which Barry has mentioned in interviews that he doesn't think he's going to come back to play Duke. So how is this going to work? You come to do a movie and you won't even continue to do the series. I when you have gold handed to you, I don't understand the choices. I don't. That's a quick recap of the film. I didn't even get to the whole subject of Arthur Shelby, Tommy's oldest brother, because it seems like that's a very touchy subject, especially with the actor Paul, who was not asked to come back because of other situations, which I'm not going to get into here. That brings me with my number one issue with this film. You know, usually when you have a character or a person who had played the character who dies, it's mentioned. It's not mentioned how they died. It's just mentioned that they died. It's just accepted that they have passed, and that's the end of the story. That did not happen here. Instead, they decide to get into the actual details and show a scene of it, not even with the actor playing Arthur, and he's just seen in the shadow. And the audience is told that Arthur had done himself in, but we find out that no, Tommy did him in. And it's just something that is so out of character and so painful and disrespectful, I think, to the actor who played Arthur. With that whole dilemma, why would you focus on his death when that time can be used to explain why don't we see Lizzie, Tommy's second wife? Why don't we see Charlie, his son with Grace? Where's Finn? And the other thing is we don't even get Arthur's wife coming back, Linda, and her kids, who are technically Shelby's as well. Now, what about Alfie Solomon's? That was the cameo that we were all expecting and hoping for. I think there were a couple of promotional interviews that Tom Hardy was doing for other projects, and people continued to ask him, do you have your cameo? Is it happening? And he would be cheeky about the response. So we all just assumed, yeah, he's coming back. So wouldn't it make sense for Alfie to come out of hiding and convince Tommy to come out of hiding, and both of them work together to undermine the Nazis? So with all that being said, let's talk about what this film could have been, what it should have been. I think Steven Knight making World War II a focus for the film is ideal. It's perfect. They do start out the film talking about the counterfeit money that the Nazis are trying to use to win the war. And then they have a scene where we're covering the factory women's workforce. And we get to follow one of those women into the factory itself, and they're all celebrating her birthday, and boom, there's a bomb that happens. And it was actually a real incident that happened back in the day. Okay, that's a great framing device right there. And you have it at the top of your film. Why not move it to the middle of the film? Because honestly, I was so excited to kind of get to know these women because I feel like sometimes the women of Peaky are just killed off and not given too much of a voice. But again, that's another conversation for another time. Why not have the woman that was celebrating her birthday? Why not have her actually knowing Tommy before this all went down, and maybe just getting along with him, seeing him, or being able to pass along information about the war and what's been happening behind the scenes in the factory. So they have a camaraderie. So this incident that happens halfway through the film and Tommy finding out that she's been killed would probably be maybe like a force for him to come back, work with his sister Ada, and maybe go and ask Alfie Solomons to help assist. We could have a scene where Tommy finds Finn. Maybe Tommy says, okay, I'm giving you one last chance. Join us to help us against the Nazis. So now we have the plot of let's fight against the Nazis. Okay, subplot Lizzie and Charles. What if Tommy knew that this is probably going to be it for him? You know, whatever he does to support this cause, this is his last rodeo. So, what if he tries to make amends with Lizzie and Charles and to help support them? Even bringing back Jesse Eden, who would have been somebody who would have supported the factory workers at the time. And it now sounds like I'm trying to do the Avengers, but Peaky Blinders style. Let's bring everybody back. Let's bring the original crew back. Bring everybody who really, truly meant something to Tommy and helped, shape his story to recall the hero part of the anti hero. I think him making a sacrifice at the very end of his own life for maybe a group of people during that fight with the Nazis would be more emotionally impactful. I don't see Tommy dying in the arms of anybody. I see him saying goodbye once more. And I will do my part to put my life on the line because I put my life on the line in World War One for my people. And I'm going to do it once more. And this might be finally the end of me, the bleak midwinter. This is it. That is an ending I can get behind. Was the film necessary? I don't think so in the long run. I understand that Steven Knight and Cillian Murphy have been saying that this movie is for the fans. The production values into the sets, the costumes, the acting, across the board, I think everybody did put in as much as they could. I just don't think the writing was there to support what could have been, but what the fans who really followed this series 6 seasons in, instead of focusing on those who just didn't know the show at all. I remember a couple days after seeing the film at the beginning of March being extremely disappointed and crestfallen, and I watched that last scene from the last episode and I just had this realization that the movie is not my ending. My ending is season 6. Tommy's still riding off into the sunset, and maybe, just maybe, he might find some peace. Because in the end, that's what we're all rooting for Tommy. And I'm giving a shout out to the production teams, the cast, the crew, everybody who's ever worked on the series, because they've crafted something that we've all come to love and be obsessed with. And I will always be obsessed with Peaky Blinders. There's just no way of getting that out of my system at all. So now that the film is officially out, I'm reading all of these reviews and posts and tweets about how people are feeling about the film. What type of story would you have liked to have seen? Well, Funko Thomas Shelby, that is a wrap. And I'm going to leave you all with my favorite Thomas Shelby quote. You could change what you do, but you can't change what you want.